Welcome to Just Break Up, the podcast about love, heartbreak, and all the relationship advice you don't want to hear. My name is Sierra DeMulder.
And I'm Sam Blackwell. And today we're going to answer a letter from somebody whose partner wants more head. But before we begin, we just want to give you our Surgeon General's warning, which is that Sierra and I are not licensed mental health practitioners and are probably going to giggle a lot about blowjobs in this episode.
Yeah, we are. Sam and I are not professionals. We are not mature enough not to laugh at blowjobs. So please take our advice as you see fit. We're only here to offer our humble musings to hopefully shed some understanding and maybe some giggles about the deeply rewarding but mostly confusing experience that is blowjobs.
Oh, man.
Deeply rewarding.
We're going to have to say blowjobs so many times in this episode, and
yeah.
I'm regretting it already.
I am definitely not.
Okay.
I saw this letter. I was like, yep, this is it.
All right, let's get into today's letter. So today's letter comes from Tired Dancer, whose pronouns are she, her, who's writing from the side of the road. Dear Sam and Sierra, I've been listening to your podcast for years now and have taken so much from the two of you and the community of letter writers. And today I seek some of your personal advice. So here is my question, and I'll just cut to the chase. Are blowjobs the same thing as changing a tire? For context, I, she, her, 27 years old, and my partner, he, him, 27 years old, have been in a monogamous relationship for over 5 years. We have a stable, strong, and loving relationship. We typically are able to talk through arguments/disagreements that come up and move past things. But historically, there has been a topic that we butt heads on, and it's that he wants more head. Overall, we have a great sex life. We know each other very well and have lots of fun in the bed. And don't get me wrong, I think blowjobs are great and all. I enjoy going down on him, but sometimes I'm just tired after a long day or I'm simply not in the mood. Our most recent disagreement around this topic happened last night. I'm a dancer, and this week is a show that I've been preparing for over the last few months. Every night this week, I am either rehearsals or the full performance. Last night, on my drive home from rehearsal, I got a flat tire. Luckily, I was able to make it home. I was a bit flustered because it was late, I was tired, and I would need my car the next day. And without me asking, my partner got out of bed and helped me change my tire, which I really appreciated. After that, we got into bed, and he basically solicited that he wanted a blowjob. I was feeling exhausted from the day, so I said no, and that's when we spiraled into a disagreement around how we view sex. One of my primary love languages is acts of service, and I think this would be the same for my partner too. Where our argument stems from is that I put sex in a totally separate box from other acts of service, whereas my partner's point of view is that we should just want to please each other sexually because it makes the other person feel good, so he would put it in the same box as other acts of service. They're both something that you do for your partner out of love, is what he said. He explained that it wasn't that he was expecting it because he changed my tire, but that he was bummed that I didn't want to do it for him, and that the frustration has culminated with a handful of sexual rejections that I've given him, probably 5 times since the beginning of the year, a little over 3 months. Some more personal background, I experienced sexual assault in my early 20s, and nowadays I'm repulsed by feeling even remotely pressured to have sex. I have built up very strong boundaries around sex, and if I say nope, I don't want to feel like I have to explain myself. So when my partner asks me to explain why I'm not in the mood, I usually get pretty defensive. Like last night, I may have even said that he was being a toxic male, which maybe he was being. At the same time, he feels rejected when I say no, like I'm not attracted to him and like his desires aren't being met. This has been a long time discussion topic, and both of us just don't really seem to want to budge. So I'm seeking your wisdomly advice on how we can be more productive in addressing this and put this issue to bed. Thanks for reading. I appreciate you and the JBU community. Sincerely, Tired Dancer.
Hi, my darling. Thank you so much for writing and for trusting us with this delicate letter. And I want to say, I'll say 2 things before we take a really quick break. First, I really wish that this letter was, I could just have like a feminist anti-man rant. I don't know your boyfriend. I could make a ton of assumptions and be like, oh, what a patriarchal douche, blah, 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 blah. But I think it's more sensitive than that. And I think Sam and I want to address the sensitivities to help you, like you said, be more productive with this partner that you love and trust and feel safe with. And, you know, the whole time we're doing that, we want you to know that, like, it makes a universe's amount of sense to us that you were like, I don't want to do this, and I don't want to explain to you my no, right?
Absolutely.
That makes so much sense to us. History of sexual assault or not, right? Like, it turns me off to think about it as well. Like, it's like you use the word repulse, and I think that's such a good word to be like, ugh, like anywhere in that universe of sexuality where it's like somebody's not in a mood and the other one's pushing it, it just like makes me feel not great, right? And so we see that, we hear you, and we also know how complex and sensitive issues of sexuality and intimacy are in relationships and how unique they are to each person. So as we dive into the nuances of this letter, please know that I wish it was more black and white. I wish I could be like, fuck that dude. You know what I mean? Uh-huh. And also, we totally think that your reaction to this makes so much sense to us.
100%.
So we're going to dive into maybe some help, some perspectives, not huge perspective shifts. Like we really agree with you on a lot of this, but just some of our perspectives on this scenario to help you be more productive when you talk about this in your relationship. But first, we have to take a very quick break.
All right, everyone, welcome back. I really appreciated the way that you sort of positioned how we're going to answer this letter, and I just like want to reiterate some things that are like really true about the situation that we know to be true, which is like, one, if you want to say no to sex, you don't need to offer anyone an explanation for them to believe you, right? Like no means no, and you shouldn't have to say these to anyone, right? Like no one is entitled to knowing why you're rejecting
even
them.
Partners of 5 years. Yep.
Absolutely. Two, this man is not entitled to blowjobs. Like he can ask for them for sure, but it is not his right to get blowjobs. Like that is absolutely,
or as a man.
No, absolutely not. Right. And three, I think people are probably asking, like, how often is he going down on you? Like, I think that's an important question to be asking.
Sam means Sam.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm wondering.
When we were prepping for this letter, Sam was like, and how often do you think that he's going down on her? So when Sam says people, they mean themselves.
Yeah, no, that's exactly who I mean. And I'm trying to offset the desire to know. Right, because we do live in a society where you're absolutely right. Like toxic men.
It's called head disparity. No, I'm just making that up. Orgasm disparity is a thing,
Orgasm disparity is a thing, absolutely. But like toxic masculinity teaches boys that they are only as successful as their ability to conquest people sexually, that they are entitled to sex, that they have a right to demand it all the time, that they deserve sex for doing nice things for women, right? Like all of these things are absolutely true. And we also know that things within the relationship between two people are more complicated than just these like societal things that are happening. So
yes.
The societal stuff is absolutely true. And you're asking us how to respond to and move through a complicated situation with a partner who you love and trust and respect, and who we are going to assume also loves and trusts and respect you, and probably also assume that there are maybe some like toxic masculinity things in there because like none of us are immune to them, right? So
yes,
we are approaching this with nuance and recognizing that it is part of a broader conversation about gender. Absolutely. And sex and sexual assault and all of these different things. That said,
yeah.
Are we ready to move into the?
Yeah. Okay. I want to start by just saying something that is always affirming to me, like acknowledging really directly that there's different worldviews or different working definitions at play here. it sounds like you two both value acts of service as a way to show your love for your partner. And he may very well see, as you described to us, sex as an act of service, and you don't, as you have described in your letter. And I want to explicitly say that neither is right or wrong, because just because we have these ideas of love languages or communication styles or, even life values, or intimacy preferences, right? Just because we have these ideas of love languages and what falls under love language doesn't mean that the definition is stable or universal. Those definitions are malleable. They are unique to each person. So it makes a lot of sense to Sam and I that you don't see sex as one of those things, right? And to be honest, like intuitively, I don't either, because when I think of acts of service, I do think about changing a car tire or washing the dishes or helping me complete a task that I don't want to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
sexual acts are acts of service for me.
Well, they fall under touch, right? They fall under the umbrella of, but I totally see why in other people's minds or other people's worldviews or lived experiences, they see it as an act of service. They see it as obligation is the wrong word, but they see it as something that they do specifically because they know it will make their partner feel loved,
for sure.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And Sam is one of them, right?
Yep.
And so just taking a deep breath and like, how about this? Your conversations around this might start becoming more productive if you move through them, not trying to convince the other person that their definition of acts of service is correct, or their relationship to sex and the act of giving and receiving oral sex is universal, but instead incredibly individual and specific to you. And both of you have to acknowledge that. You know what I mean?
For sure.
Your partner, definitely, because his is more of a, tricky worldview.
Yes. Yep.
And, I also want to acknowledge, like we said, this is a sensitive letter, not just because it's triggering to feel pressured into sex or triggering to feel like you have to explain why you don't want to have sex. Like that is
for sure
very sensitive and very triggering for many people. And I also have to add that it's very realistically triggering for some people to feel rejected, unwanted, undesired.
Yep.
Some people find that incredibly triggering. And I'm not just talking about the broader view of the male fragility.
Yep.
Like Sam said, the patriarchy has definitely taught men this assumption over sex, this obligation of sex, right? And also as an individual, as a human being, I know that if my partner says no to my sexual advances, I have to do quick mental work in my mind to be like,
yep.
It's not about me. I'm not being rejected and I'm still desirable, even though they don't want to have sex right now. Like that is, it's a situation of sensitivity in all directions.
For sure. Absolutely. And like one of the things that I wanted to talk about was the fact that this is a common trap that folks fall into. And like have had conversations with my therapist about the reality of this, which is like when there are disparate levels of like sexual desire, right? In this case, like when there are disparate levels of like blowjob wanting and blowjob giving, right? Like what happens is that like there's a predictable pattern of the person who wants to initiate sex more, wants more sex, feels like they're being rejected, right? They feel like it hurts their feelings because they're feeling like, I'm doing I asked this person for sex and now they don't want to. And that means that they don't love me or that they don't like me or they don't find me attractive. And the person who doesn't want to have sex feels pressured, even if the person who's trying to initiate sex isn't trying to pressure them, right? Like They still feel pressured, even if it's just like an ask, right? They feel pressured. And then when they can't perform, when they can't offer sex, they feel guilty that they should be having more sex with the person, right? Like this is a common trap, and it exacerbates the problem because now we're in our separate camps with our separate feelings, looking at the situation and reading entirely different things from it, right? Like we're both looking at it and one person is like, this is rejection. This is not an act of service, right? Like she's not showing that she loves me because she's not providing the service, which I think is what he's feeling, or like she doesn't want to have sex with me. She thinks I'm gross. And then you're over here being like, I'm tired and I feel pressured. And now I feel guilty about the fact that I'm not doing the thing that my partner is asking me to. And it's like, because sex is so tricky to talk about and invokes so many feelings of shame in lots of us, especially folks who have been like part of like a sexual purity culture, that it like just festers because we don't know how to talk about it, and there's so much that's involved in it that is like below the surface. So I want to like name this because I want to name that it's a common pattern. Like you're not the only person who's experiencing this like disparate reaction to the same thing that's happening here. And to say that like what needs to happen is to have more in-depth conversations about what does it look like for you and him to believe each other about your experiences of what this means for each other, right? So that you're not just looking at him and being like, you're a toxic man, which who knows, he might be, I don't know. I've never met the man. And he's not looking at you and being like, oh, she doesn't love me. She doesn't like me, right? She's rejecting me. She doesn't think I'm attractive.
Want me. Yep.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Right. And like airing those things out. It sounds like some of that stuff kind of came to the surface in your argument about the tire thing. Also, can we just like pause and say like, what terrible timing for him to bring this up
in my
after
notes,
changing the tire?
In my notes, I said it literally is, it's unfortunate that this conversation is tied to the tire because it's not about the tire, but the tire is a fucking superb analogy for how he sees it. He does see it as an act of service.
Right.
And to Sam and I were like, ugh, gross.
Yeah. Well, because it makes it seem like, and maybe this is true, it makes it seem like he was like, oh, I will change her tire and then I'll get a blowjob in response.
Right. Which I don't think it was.
Right.
But that's what it makes it seem like.
But it is also like, from my understanding, like folks who are like have a higher sexual drive than their partner are also trying to figure out what are the things that unlock more sex, right? Like what are the things that I can try to help get me what I want and need, right? So that I can not be rejected again, right? Like they're trying to figure out that because they're like, because in their heads.
And that feels creepy, but I know what you're saying. Like it's
no, because they're like, how can I prove to you that I love you enough that you'll feel comfortable enough to have sex with me, right? Like, how can I prove that I'm attractive, that I'm providing enough so that you will feel safe enough to be able to do this with me and you won't reject me again, right? Like, and we're talking about like the basest like things. Like, I don't think that anyone is necessarily doing this intentionally, but like in their head, it's like, why isn't this thing happening? We both want it, right? Like we are both attracted to each other. Sex is something that we both want. And it can be hard for them to understand, like, no, sometimes people don't want it, right? Or they don't want it at the same level. And this is like, I'm saying this from experience, y'all. Like this is like the types of conversation that I also think that you need to be having with your partner about like, what does sex mean to you? And then not just that, right? Where we sit in our camps and we tell each other what the things are, but also like, how do we come together around communicating about sex in a way that reinforces that he's not trying to pressure you into doing anything that you don't want to do, because I don't actually think that's what he's doing, right? I don't think he's like, I want you to give me a blowjob even though you don't want to, right? Like I think he wants you to want to do it, which is different. And two, that you are not rejecting him because you don't like him or because you think his penis is gross or whatever, but because you're tired, right? That you actually do love him deeply, but that like you don't want to have sex with him in this moment. And what are the ways that you can talk about the reality of those things instead of just talking about blowjobs? Because the blowjob thing is like fraught and it means different things to both of you. But can you talk about what is actually underneath, which is his desire to want to be sexually desired, right? And your desire to want to be loving for him, but also to not feel like you need to do that through this important sexual act.
Yes. I think I want to say one more thing on Sam's note about this communication effort that's going to have to be had, which is, it makes so much sense to me because of your experience in the world, in the body that you have, with your history of SA. Like, it makes sense to me that you are repulsed and don't want to explain your no. Like I said at the very beginning, that makes a lot of sense to me, right? And as Sam said, like, no means no, and people should be able to take it at value there, right? And in the same moment, in the same breath, in the same body, and in the same life, that is not the same as you and your loving, safe partner having a consensual and hopefully productive conversation about where the bounds of your desire and your consent and your enthusiasm and your intimacy lie. Talking about why you are saying no now it feels the same, but it isn't the same as the no you had to give earlier that wasn't listened to, right? Or the no like, it feels the same. It can trigger us in the same way, and proceed with caution. Like, if this advice doesn't work for you, don't listen to me. I want your safety above all else, right? Yeah. And also, this is your partner of 5 years. I'm hoping that he is a safe, secure, loving, trusting partner. And you're going to have to tell him sometimes, maybe if you want, why you're saying no, right? And I know it's exhausting to explain it, and I know it's triggering to explain it, but sometimes it's helpful for me when I'm feeling really vulnerable and triggered and defensive because of those feelings and everything coming up and everything at play in this very sensitive letter. I have to remind myself how this is different than what my fear or my reaction or my pattern is telling me. This isn't the same as some schmuck on the street, getting angry at your rejection of their advances. This is your partner in an intimate, loving relationship wanting to understand you, right?
Absolutely.
And he has to see it that way too, right? He can't just see it as a no and like, oh, why not, man? Like, he has to be vulnerable in his desire to understand why you don't want to, you know what I mean? That's vulnerable, right? And I also want to say, like, we're not always going to be wanted in the way that we want to be wanted in relationships. We are never always going to be wanted in the way we want to be wanted. Just as we won't always compliment the needs of our partner in a relationship. Like, this is all very normal and common to us. It makes a lot of sense to Sam and I, because of the worldviews that are coming up against each other, because of the love languages, because of the history, because of the energy level, because of the desire level, we're just not always going to be seamlessly compatible. And so we have to show up to the vulnerable act of trying to understand, curiosity, even taking sex out of the conversation. Like, we often assume we are owed things from our partners. When we love them, we are owed their love back. When we wash their car, they need to show up for us in this way, like, whatever. And just like kind of trying to erase that noise and just hearing and believing what the other person is saying and being curious and open to what is bringing them to this exact moment. For
sure. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think as you're like having these conversations with him, pay attention to how he's responding to them too. Right. I think I have faith that he's going to be able to respond well to them and to have a meaningful conversation about the different perceptions of what sex is, or this particular sex act means to either of you, and hopefully come up with like constructive ways to make himself to self-soothe when you understandably don't want to engage in this sexual act, and think about like, what are the strategies to prove to each other that you continue to love and affirm each other, even if this sex act is never part of the relationship, right? Like, doesn't have to be part of it in any way, although it sounds like you do like it. So like, great, keep doing it if you want to. And if he's able to hear that and receive that and meet you halfway in those conversations, that's great. And if he's not, then this is telling you something about him. And I do want you to pay attention to that, because I do know that like, my deep hope for you is that he is somebody who's going to be able to hear this and receive it and work with you on it. And I also know that toxic masculinity exists, right? I know that there are dudes out there who have some pretty toxic understandings of their entitlement to sex. And if that starts coming out, right? If he's sort of like digging into that, if he's not willing to see beyond that, or if that's how you're feeling about the conversations and where they're going, I do want you to pay attention to that, because I think that is
totally
really real.
agree.
And I don't want you to get into a point where you're giving up too much, knowing that he is, or I don't want you to be in a place where you're giving up too much in the face of something where he's not willing to like meet you, or where he's going to demand things of you that you're not comfortable with.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's a perfect place to wrap it up, because Sam and I are moving through this letter assuming that this is a safe relationship. And we also want you to know that if any of those alarm bells go off, or if you really can't make those conversations productive in an empathetic, loving, and safe way, then that is telling you something. We love you so much. Thanks so much for trusting us with this letter.
Absolutely. We love you. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. If you would like more content from us, or if you would like to get access to our monthly office hours, you can support us on Patreon. If you support us on Patreon for as little as $5, you'll get an additional bonus weekly episode. That's patreon.com/justbreakuppod. You can slide into our DM, send us your favorite relationship meme, but most importantly, you can submit your questions about all matters of the heart at justbreakuppod.com, which is also where you can find our merchandise. Please remember to like, follow, subscribe, give us a 5-star rating and review. This literally keeps our mics on and helps us reach more brokenhearted souls who need two random strangers giving them relationship advice. Just Break Up is a production of Duvid Media, original music recording, editing, producing by All Magical Things. And All Magical Things by our good friend Spencer Worth Davis. Make sure to check out his podcast and his music. And remember, this is all sensitive. Intimate relationships between 2 people, 3 people, however many people in a partnership are sensitive, because we're all just trying to get our needs met. We're all trying to get our wounds healed, and we're all trying to navigate through the social and familial conditioning that we have experienced. It is best to move through these relationships with curiosity and compassion, and also a sense of self-assurance, a sense of inner morals that can help us guide us when we get into places that we know we shouldn't be in. And if all else fails, just break up.